Hey everyone, welcome back to our day 3 watercolor tutorial on how to paint a watercolor palm tree. I'll have all of the descriptions and supplies I use listed over on my blog. Let's get started. We are going to just jump into a full-on painting today. It's still going to be our practices, going over our watercolor basics, but instead of breaking up our page into two, we're going to tackle a full page. And I feel like once you do this, you can kind of feel like you can handle a little bit more and start to progress up to bigger paintings. We're still going to stay small for a while, but this is definitely a great stepping point from those two little sections we were doing before to just a full-on 5x7, 4x6 size. So today we're going to go with a wet on dry technique. We are going to be using these three colors, and what's going to make this practice a little bit different is we are going to practice our color mixing with this painting. We are going to use just these three colors to make a beautiful sunset with a palm tree, and you're just going to see how adding these two colors together is going to make a dark, rich, blackish, brownish color that's going to give us some depth and help our composition pop instead of being super flat if we were just to use a black or a brown. So let's jump in and get started. These colors are already out on my palette, so I'm just using those tubes as reference. We are going to grab our size 12 round brush that we've been using so far. I'm going to get it nice and wet with some clean water. And we're going to start with my Alizarin Crimson. So this is a reddish pink color. And I'm going to start, like I said, with that color. And we're going to go in at a diagonal right here. I'm going to get a little bit more water on my brush, and I'm going to tap out any extra. And I'm going to start just jumping right back in. So starting at that corner, angling down, and right about here where I'm touching this other corner, I'm going to stop. I'm going to clean my brush off into this muddied water and then get some really fresh, clean water on my brush. And I'm going to go into my cadmium yellow. And with a decent amount of water on my brush and paint, I'm going to go right underneath it, starting where it's clean. And then I'm going to blend up into that Alizarin Crimson. Just kind of let that work back down. And then I'm going to go and clean my brush off again so I can go right back into my clean yellow. And then I can continue working this color, not going back into that reddish pink area. And then I'm actually just going to keep going. I'm going to go right down, get a little bit more water on my brush to blend this. And then right about here, I'm going to stop. And without cleaning my brush, I'm just going to go straight into that Alizarin Crimson. Probably need a little bit more water. And I'm going to start in this corner. And I'm going to just come up. And I am going to meet that yellow. And I'm going to blend that in. I'm going to get a little bit more of that Alizarin Crimson just to reflect this, so it's the same kind of dark. It's going to be a mirror image where our sky up here is going to reflect in our water down here. So you kind of want the values to match. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it should be pretty close. All right, and so there we have our basic wash. We're going to just let this completely dry, and then we're going to jump into that color mixing that I told you about. So now we're going to quickly color mix together, and you're going to see how we're going to get this kind of foreground color that we need with using green and our reddish pinkish color. So I'm going to go straight into that green. This is going to be my sap green, and I'm going to put it over here on my palette. You're going to notice my palette is a little bit blue, and those are just some stain marks that the blue has done to my palette. So blue is not getting into this mixture. And I just want to make that clear so you're not a little confused if you notice that. I'm going to go straight then into that Alizarin Crimson. I cleaned my brush off because I don't want to muddy this little palette that I have anymore. And I'm going straight into my green. And you're seeing how this is already making a grayish, muddyish brown color. And right now I can see a lot more green than red. So I'm going to get a little bit more of my red paint and mix that in. Honestly, that's really good. And then I'm going to get a little bit more of that green, a little bit more of my red. And you're just going to kind of go back and forth until this has a super dark consistency. I am going to grab just a little bit of my black, which I know I did not have in that picture or the beginning of this video. So I apologize for that. But I'm just going to grab a little bit of that, a little bit more red. And again, you just go back and forth until you find the right color. That we have that dark mixture, I'm actually going to switch brushes. I am not going to use my large brush anymore for this painting. So you can just put that away. And we're going to switch over to our size 6. I'm going to get that wet, kind of dry it off a little bit because I want this paint over here to be really thick. And I'm going to find the center, and I'm going to just draw a straight horizon line. And then I'm going to just kind of create little bumpy, I guess, shapes along this line. And this is just going to represent an island or something off in the distance. I'm going to try to create these edges just to be a little bit higher up than our center. And that looks very symmetrical, so I'm going to switch that up. Right, so there we go. Get a little bit more of that paint. I'm going to add a little bit more black to it. Just going to kind of go over it a little, not too much, just to kind of give a little bit more depth. But just by using that brownish mixture, you're going to see more color show through, and black is just going to not fade into this gray. It's going to give us just a better, nicer little effect than to just use a straight black. Now while that horizon line dries, I'm going to clean my brush off, and I'm going to get some of my Alzerian Crimson, see if I can get it to be a little bit more on the clean side. There we go. And then I'm going to get just a light wash on my brush, so a lot of water, a little bit of paint, and then I'm going to tap out that extra, and then with the very tip of my brush, a very light motion going back and forth, I am just going to kind of let my brush create some lines in the water. And this is just going to give it the effect of some moving water instead of just being a flat wash. This is going to take your painting from being very flat, very basic, to having some real depth. You don't want every line to continue across the page. You want some to be shorter, some to be longer, and you want them to be thicker as they get closer to the bottom of the page. So now that everything is dried, so check to make sure that your horizon line right here, your little island, has dried. And then we're going to go back into that brown mixture. Mine has kind of lightened up because I used a lot of it, so I'm going to recreate it by getting green and red. I'm going to go back in that little bit of black. Right, and then I'm going to tap my brush off, and right along this side, I'm going to create kind of a bulb shape, very slight one, and just kind of bring that up. Just kind of let that carry right there. And this is going to be our palm tree in the foreground. So right now I'm going to fill in down here while this little line is wet so there's not a harsh line. And then up here I'm going to create very quick motions to indicate where I want my palm leaves to be. Like that. And then from here, we're just going to create our palm leaves. We're going to use quick lines. trying to use the tip of my brush for this, because right there that was pretty thick. You don't really, not really wanting that for this. I feel like it needs a little more right there. I'm going to do shorter lines since it's curving really a lot. Alright, I'm happy with that. Okay, so now we're going to go just straight into that black paint. So we're just going to let that tree naturally dry, and I'm going to get some black paint on the tip of my brush. Pretty thick amount, so a lot of paint, a little bit of water. I'm going to come back through, and I'm going to splotch this in. I still want some of that brown to show through. Just because I want there to be texture on this tree. And then I'm just going to kind of carry that up. And then again, we're just going to go straight in and do some really quick line motions. Using that black, building on top of that brown color. Like I've said a lot in this video, to create the depth that we want, so this tree isn't a super flat silhouette. I'm just following the same pattern I created at the beginning. I'm not creating any new direction in my lines. I'm trying just to follow kind of follow that same shape and pattern. So right now we're just really learning our basics, and this is all how you're going to get to that point where you create your own style and you're going to have your own way of doing things. But you have to know the basics that every watercolor artist knows.